Right, so today I wanted to make a video on a topic that I think is a fairly pressing issue, in that in society, when you have the different groups on either side, the groups on the left tend to be able to define themselves and define their own motives, and the groups on the right tend to be guilty until proven innocent and have to prove their motives. Antifa is a good example in that if you talk to most leftists or most leftist media outlets, they'll they'll ascribe good intentions to Antifa, and they won't talk about them in a negative light. If you if you have them talk about, the Proud Boys or even Trump supporters, they'll automatically ascribe them in a negative light, and it'll be guilty until proven innocent. Even though, for all intents and purposes, Antifa is about pretty comparable to whatever the worst of the worst groups on the right that have significance are. I mean, they're violent, they're communists, they're not really. I mean, I know that people like to describe them as moderate, but they're really not moderate. Um, but that's the difference in the political realm nowadays that people don't seem to understand, and it's important because I think a lot of people in the middle, as far as the political realm go, they think that, oh, well, both sides are pretty much the same. They're both tribal and whatnot, but they don't realize that, like I said, groups on the left tend to be able to ascribe their own motives. Groups on the right tend to, number one, be ascribed the worst possible motives that could be thought of having that belief. If you're someone who talks about race and IQ, that must mean that's because you're a horrible racist, not because you have a different theory of how, for reasons why blacks don't do as good as whites, Hispanics don't do as good as whites, all that kind of things, and that you want to talk about other possible reasons other than just racism, 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 prejudice, prejudice, prejudice. Um, and they've invested so much in their belief system that and they've been so heavily brainwashed by public schools and the media and college and all this stuff that it's almost impossible to undo the brainwashing that they've been had done to them. So this is something that you really have to recognize nowadays, that if you hear the media, or even the average person, because the average person listens to the media, even though the majority of people don't listen to watch the news or all these kind of things too, opinions, even by a lot of independents and the average person, probably 90% of their 95% of people, their opinions on things that are going on, they maybe not come directly, but they come indirectly from the mainstream media. Like, let's just be honest. Even though the majority of people don't watch it, it still comes from that. Like, whenever you hear about immigration, it's always, if you want to talk about reducing immigration, you always have to prove yourself that, oh, why do you want to do that? You're not a racist, are you? All that kind of stuff. But if you want to increase immigration, we never go after those people on that. Well, what's your plan for how you're going to pay for all these immigrants? Where are they going to live? How are they going to get food, healthcare, all that kind of stuff? What regulations you're going to have for who's going to come? Like, we never press those people on their on why they want it, but we always just pressure and pressure and pressure the other side. So that's kind of the thing I wanted to talk about in this video and get across, is that there's a very big double standard in that if you hold the more traditional right-wing libertarian positions, your positions need to be constantly scrutinized, and if they can't be legitimately scrutinized, well, then you have to slander, that's where the racist, the sexist, all these kind of things come. So if you have someone on the right, or anywhere on there, maybe not, you're not a traditional conservative, but you're on the left, or you're a moderate, and you have a belief that if they're calling you racist or they're slandering you in any way, shape, or form, that's 99% of the time that's because you have the better argument. Your position is more held in reason and evidence. If they're debating you, then you're probably not the same. But again, a lot of times people debate you on immigration, and then they'll clearly have lost, and then they'll go to the race card. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of this video. Like I have the Antifa Wikipedia page pulled up here, which I think they do a half decent job of describing them, but it's still not. It's not what it is. They describe them as anti-fascist, which again, they're not anti-fascist. They, number one, they're against free speech, which every fascist country, or which is basically what a fascist wants. They won't let opposing groups organize publicly, which is what fascists do. Like in a fascist country, one of the easiest ways to tell if you're in a fascist country is no free speech, and you need to organize in private if you don't go along with the status quo. And that's exactly what Antifa does. Not only that, they're violent too, and they don't show their faces. Which obviously means that, I mean, what group that organizes in public that covers their face can you think of that has good intentions? Like, I can't think of any. Maybe there's one, but I can't think of any. And that, at least, at the very least, Wikipedia, I mean, Wikipedia's definitely kind of gone off the rails lately and kind of being clearly a little biased to the left. Maybe not super biased, but definitely a little bit biased. At the very least, they do say that they do commit property damage and physical violence. But yeah, like, they tend to be anti-capitalist. That's not true because, I mean, look at Andy Ngo, for example. This guy's a gay Asian guy, and they look at this. Their stated focus is on fighting the far right and white supremacists, but yet they beat half to death a gay Asian guy, when according to this they claim to be very concerned about marginalized groups. That's the word I'm looking for. They're really concerned about helping those groups, but then they go and they beat a gay Asian guy half to death. Like, come on. That's not a good description of them. I know I've seen most mainstream media outlets defending them. Even CNN finally, I think, had one or two of their anchors finally condemn them after the attack on Andy Ngo, but I know Don Lemon and a lot of these guys have defended them in the past and continue to defend them. I know the Democrats, not one of them tweeted out after the Andy Ngo attack condemning them. So, and I think a lot of people that want to point out too that the right is just as bad with these kind of things. Number one, I've kind of disproved that in that whenever we're talking about stuff, it always comes from the lens of the left's position. The right has to prove itself. The left has to be proved wrong. That's the big difference. And the other thing is that there's a clear difference in the politicians. Trump didn't very, very clearly condemn the white supremacist attack at the rally in when that guy killed the one person with the Dodge Charger, and people cited that as evidence that that must mean he's a white supremacist. But then not one Democrat condemns the Antifa violence, and you don't see anyone saying, well, that must mean that all the Democrats are supporters of Antifa. So that's kind of another one of the double standards, but I'll kind of leave it there, in that everything in society is viewed from, like I said, the realm of the leftist position needs to be proved wrong, the right position needs to be proved right. It's a clear double standard, and the people who say that, oh, no, it's the same, it's really not. So I'll leave it there, but if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.